Hackers of Reddit. What's something you stumbled upon that you immediately noped the out? Story 1. I had a huge backlog. Don't know why I did it, a combination of boredom and voyeurism, I think, and lots of free time. I felt sort of like a hacker, at least. Occasionally, you stumble upon things you wish you weren't supposed to. I mean, yeah, I know how that sounds. Once, I came upon a guy's Facebook, and after a while, you instantly realize it hasn't been used in years. A bit like coming across an abandoned house. Tons of notifications and unopened PMs. On the top of the list of those messages, it was a woman that kept trying to contact him. My first impression was that it was a stalker, maybe an ex that wasn't able to move on. I really don't want to get into details because even for me, it feels like I walked into an absolutely private matter, but it was mostly her talking about her day-to-day stuff and occasionally begging him to come back. Sometimes it got real weird, with her telling him how she felt him in the wind. Turns out the guy was dead, and people have strange ways of coping. I left that habit behind after that. Just imagine being that woman and coming back to find your messages read. Would fuck me up good for a couple of days. Was asked to steal a couple bitcoins from a customer associate back when Bitcoin and altcoins were booming. Got access to his wallet fairly easily, being curious as I am, and checked how he got so much coin. Had tons of small sum payments with links attached to the transactions. Checked one and it was just CP. Lots and lots of CP. Told the guy I was working for his associate was a f***ing pedo and quickly dropped a line to the relevant authorities. Shit like that fucks you up, man. I'm not talking a few grand in Bitcoin in this dude's wallet, but closer to 6 and 7 figures. Just hundreds and hundreds of small $50 to $1,000 transactions. Many long years ago, there was this website called Eon 8. It was basically just a weird, ambiguous splash page with a countdown timer and a map with red dots all over it. This thing was super effective at rustling the jimmies of the entire internet. I found a way in relatively early on, and based on a few things I found in the web route, it became immediately obvious that the whole thing was a prank. So I decided to leave it alone and watch it play out. Right at the very end of the countdown, the guy that was running the whole thing updated the website with his big reveal, including some message about how hackers from all over the world kept trying to break in, but none could manage it, calling us all lame noobs. I was a bratty teenager, so I took that as a challenge. I was on a teleconference with some other hackers at the time, so we jumped on the server through a back door I'd left and defaced the page with this severely cringe-inducing message. Oh gosh, I can't believe I'm sharing this. I blacked out the guy's name, but I'm sure someone here probably knows him or knows of Eon 8. So if he sees this, sorry dude, GD kids, right? Anyway, right around this time, as the countdown ended and for a while after, the server was getting swamped to the point of an essential DDoS. This was happening while I was logged into SSH on the server. I was in the process of doing some cleanup, deleting some utility scripts I'd put on the server, but I was impatient. The lag was grueling, and I was working faster than the server was sending me responses. I changed directories at one point and tried to delete everything in it, before seeing a response from the server, and didn't realize I'd fat-fingered the CD command. I ended up deleting a bunch of his stuff that I didn't mean to. The second I realized what I'd done, I instantly felt horrible and noped the f*** out of there. We had planned on razzing the guy for a while, but I was just totally done. Story 4. I was hired to develop a payment processor for an unnamed large fast food brand. At this point, I had the ability to take out $100K a day into an offshore account. I would have done this by pulling a movie plot, like a heist. I was going to take 2% of all tax payments. I was thinking about it for a while, then the next day someone I knew was busted for doing the same thing on a much smaller brand. At this point, I dipped out. I ended up working for the brand for a few more years, without committing fraud. Sounds like the plot from the movie Office Space. Only they got lucky as their building burned down, destroying all the evidence. Story 5. Not really hacking, but back in the day I wrote a Trojan that would steal user account info and CD keys from Diablo 2, which I would sell later on eBay for sweet, sweet cash. It would proxy between the connection of the client and server, and while the user was in a chat room on the Realm, it would spam download links from the Trojan and subsequently hide the messages from anyone infected so they wouldn't suspect anything. This made it self-spreading, and it was actually so effective that eventually Blizzard put up a warning about it on their website. I took down the sites hosting it at that point since I was scared and didn't want it to get traced back to me. Story 6. Not much of what I saw, but what almost happened. Was working for a financial institution, and they handed me a notebook and said I was a sysadmin DevOps engineer. I pretty much had full access to my own machine, but then a new policy kicked in and an antivirus was made obligatory into every machine. I hadn't given much thought, thinking it'd be just regular protection to any machine, but I completely forgot I had a proper set of hacking tools installed locally. Metasploit alone has thousands of identifiable signatures for malware. And the antivirus went completely mental onto my machine. Manager got a full report of it, and she wasn't very pleased about it. Fortunately, she wasn't very tech savvy, so I just got a slap on the wrist and had to reinstall the OS fresh. This was 10 years ago. I was very naive back then. I was just beginning my career, and I had several logs of successfully exploited websites locally on that machine. SQL infection, LFI, RCE, you name it. I was on a rampage trying to get better and better. For every exploited site, I'd take a look in, watch for anything interesting, and when I'd get bored of it, I'd just hit a message to the IT team somehow and tell them about the bug anonymously. So nothing criminal, just very, very dumb. If my manager ever involved authorities, if she ever had suspicions of me, my life could have been way different. I've since then always encrypted my shit and never hacked for pleasure in places I shouldn't be trying that. Also now, I strongly separate working devices from personal. Do not hack for fun. Do not hack for money. If you're gonna do it, be legit, have contracts, report bugs responsibly, and absolutely don't do that at work. Ever. Story 7. Old boss asked me to find the personal data of somebody he had met at a hotel, for reasons. I explained that I was unlikely to be able to do it untraceably, explained social engineering, explained that I was no good at social engineering, and noped the fuck out. Let him try. Story 8. Not really a hack. The school IT department were asshats and left the password to the main account hard-coded in a batch script. I went in and found all the teachers' pay, student names, addresses, SSNs, just to name a few. Story 9. Hardly hacking, but it counts. I like finding unsecured IP cameras, mostly ones with no password or the default password, and then log into them to see wherever they are. A lot are in houses. Some are in kids' rooms or whatever. Never tend to keep any open long enough to see people. One was in a random house in the front room, and there was some girl on the sofa who was 4 or 5 years old. After a few minutes, they got up and were totally naked. Never went back to that one. There is a website that you can use to view millions of unprotected webcams. Kind of funny, actually. Story 10. I was at a CS LAN party ages ago. I ran a bunch of NetSend scripts on the network, causing prompts to pop up in front of the game saying dumb shit like, "Good luck, right behind you. Your mother gives a great head." Eventually, the party organizer paused the games to walk everyone through how to disable messaging services. The funny thing was that about 15% of the people already had that off, including my group, and it caused a few unfair wins. I noped out when people started looking at me since I wasn't exactly quiet about the whole thing. Was fucking amazing, and the start of a long road of engineering and InfoSec work. Story 11. In terms of petty gamer kid shit leading to real learning and career options, I was trying to get WC3 Frozen Throne for DOTA All-Stars. The LAN had provided a cracked copy and patch, but the patch wouldn't run. It was trying to find the path from a non-existent registry file. I looked at registry entries for other Blizzard products and created a registry file from scratch. I ran the patch again, expecting the next error and the next one until I finally created them all, but it worked immediately. I felt like a tiny god on that LAN, and I won some nerd points for being able to help everyone. Story 13. This was back in the day of AIM and chat rooms. Had a guy who I was watching in a chat room. I had sent him a message acting as a 14-year-old. Told him to download my naughty picture. He did, and it was just a quick download that gave me access to the entire system. The tool I used displayed the entire system and all functions in a hierarchy of importance, with the Windows kernel at the tippy top. As soon as I was all set, I deleted his kernel. I lost all my tools from back then, but that was a sweet time to be around. Seek and destroy internet. If you're wondering what a kernel is, well, it's the core of the operating system. The drivers for the basic parts like memory or the CPU itself. It's the chunks of code that makes a functioning computer do things. It exists and lives as a layer on its own underneath any real applications, including the operating system's other components. The kernel has ultimate control over the physical devices in a system: memory, CPU, keyboards, hard disks, you name it. If you think of a working workstation as a human body, think of the organs and limbs as the physical devices. They do actions. The applications are the brain, which tells the organs and limbs what to do. The kernel would be the nervous system. It interfaces to allow the brain to properly tell the parts what to do, make sure the parts do that, and it performs some rudimentary functions on its own. Reflexes, crashing on potentially dangerous hardware malfunction. Crashed a print daemon on a SprintNet X.25 connected system, thereby crashing the whole mainframe. Never reconnected again because I was afraid they'd be monitoring. This was like in 1991, you whippersnappers. Story 15. Was a spammer in the mid to late 90s. There was a group of 3 of us who would make a website using affiliate content and then spam the link to it. Started off by scanning AOL chat rooms, and we made a decent living from it. 2 to 3K for each of us per week. Then we got bigger into it and left the confines of AOL, which led to bigger paydays of 20 to 30K per month until the authorities knocked on one of my partner's doors. They never did come to me, and I was 17 at the time. Stopped once that happened. Story 16. Pretty deep in the dark web for work, looking for certain things. I came across certain adverts on darknet search websites that made me leave work until the next day. Noped the f*** out of there. I would prefer not to say what it was, but you can guess. Story 17. Back in middle school, I used a VNC to hack all of the school's PCs. I had a free lesson, so I went to the computer lab or whatever they called it. I connected to the internet, ran Angry IP Scanner, great tool by the way, and picked a random computer. Now, for those non-hackers, a VNC basically allows you to connect to a different person's PC and control it and monitor it. As soon as I connected to this guy's computer, I saw porn all over the screen, like that hardcore BDSM shit or whatever it's called. The reason why this is so weird is that everyone there was like 11, 12, 13, 14, and all that not safe for work stuff was never really talked about in the school. You should have opened a notepad on the kid's computer. This is the principal. I will be forced to call your parents because of the misuse of school computers. Story 18. When I was young, I got into hacking AOL for cool screen names. I met people who engineered AOL. They would call up AOL and pretend their system, Merlin, was down and trick real employees into resetting stuff. I was on the converse call when they stole the owner of AOL's accounts and other high figures. Couple years later, we all were friends playing Halo and stuff together. They told me to connect to this live server. You can control the mouse. They hacked the Comcast website and wanted me to connect to it. I had this weird gut feeling to ask what it was for once, and they told me. I said hell to the no. Also, these same people had a botnet channel. I was in it back in the day, and a government cybercrimes agent came in and told us to shut it down. I was like 14, so I was scared I was going to juvie. But now I work in sysadmin and have a good job, so I'm kind of thankful I wandered into that AOL chat back in the day. It made me the person I am. Story 19. Script Kitty College Me decided to play with a pen testing program against a government website from the school network. The amount of network info and other metadata as well as actual documents it was pulling was scary. Plus, it was overheating my rig because of the processing power involved. And just overall, I realized it was a shitty idea. So I killed it. Story 20. Not really hacking, kind of amateur teenage social engineering. A friend and I created an account on a French chat website. It was called Coco Chat or something like that. That was aimed at children, I think. We made our account look like we were a 9-year-old girl and started chatting with people. Needless to say, it was pretty disturbing to see pedos talking with us. One of them was talking almost every day with us. We even thought about sending him a keylogger or a Trojan to find more information about him and call the police on him. In the end, we were too disgusted and frightened by this guy to continue doing that. Story 21. A bird-watching site where every single image had an embedded zip full of CP. Fuck that a million times over. You can't unsee that. You can't forget about it. It's been over a decade and some therapy. It still affects me. It also cracked the veneer of my world. I can't look at a site like it and not be suspicious anymore. Story 22. It was horrible. This was when I was just getting started as a hacker, and I clearly remember it was a rainy night and I was up till 3 in the morning trying to break into this thing. I saw 2 words come up again and again, which shook me to the core and scared me straight. I have never attempted to hack anything after that. It was over 20 years ago, but I can still smell the words. They were, access denied. Story 23. Okay, so one time I was looking to play this game early, so did a dial around the area I knew the game's company was based in, looking to see if any computers would answer. I found one that looked to be correct and dialed into it. I saw some simple games, but one stood out to me. It was called the Global Thermonuclear War. So anyway, it turned out to be this military supercomputer, and all of America's nukes were connected to it. By playing the game, I had inadvertently started a war game situation, and the supercomputer thought I was a Soviet nuclear attack on the USA. There was this countdown timer dialing down to when the computer would launch its response, which would start World War III. Luckily, I was able to track down the developer of the software, and he told me he named the system after his son David. David was a form of computer learning, but he never learned about zero-sum games. Luckily, I used my super hacker skills to teach it about tic-tac-toe until it started to learn about no-win situations. It played thousands of games against itself, and then started to play global thermonuclear war against itself until it learned that nobody wins. The computer at the end even said, "Strange game, Professor. It seems the only way to win is not to play." Well, after that, I felt I very much needed a day off school. Story 24. Was given a computer once to try to get into without deleting and reinstalling the operating system. Was told they got it for cheap use. The user forgot the password, blah blah blah. Linux OS. They thought they locked it down, and they did fairly well, but I was still able to get into it. I had never been on the dark web before, but in their files were some lists of web addresses. Nope. Also found histories and files that suggested they were stealing credits and scamming or stealing from people. Wiped and reinstalled. Be careful when opening Pandora's box. Story 25. Never really saw anything that made me nope the f*** out. I can say I've been a bit spooked before. In hindsight, it was likely just a coincidence, and even makes me laugh a little bit now. I was just at my local coffee shop enumerating the network. And of course, the router was one of my go-tos. Couldn't find a CVE for the brand, model, or version. So I decided to just brute force the login form for any weak creds while I continued to enumerate. The brute force finished successfully, but the password it landed on was weird because it stopped on the word amateur. I thought, no freaking way. And sure enough, when I tested it manually, it spit out an incorrect password error. To this day, I think it was one of two things. Hydra was just being buggy, most likely. However, my overactive imagination tells me there is a small chance that some network admin watching the brute force happening remotely was laughing his ass off and threw me a false positive, and the word amateur was referring to my pathetic attempt at hacking. 'Cause let's be honest, brute forcing is a last resort, yet simultaneously a hella skitty move. At least I felt like that when I decided to do it. Shit. Story 26. Got hired through a website where someone wanted me to gain access to a kid's computer who doxed him. Got onto it and found that he was looking up recipes for explosives. Turned him in and noped out of there. Have had a few others where I found CP. It's way too common.